Who do you think is more powerful in our consumer society? Consumers or producers? Producers do have a lot of power since they're the ones making the goods and their marketing techniques can manipulate us into buying their products. But remember, producers depend on consumers. If no one is buying their goods, they're going to go out of business. That means you have a lot of power. In a previous video, we talked about the factors that can influence your consumption of goods and services, and we talked a little bit about the government. Just to review, there's a lot of rules and regulations that are there for our own health and safety. Imagine what it would be like if there were no regulations for electrical devices on, say, your phone charger. That could be really dangerous. There are also warnings on things like cigarette packages to try and prevent us from buying them because the impact of cigarette smoke on our health. The government looks over trade relationships we have with other countries, so they can also influence our consumption by putting tariffs or taxes on goods from other countries. That makes them more expensive, and the hope is that we'll be tempted to buy more Canadian-made goods. Governments can even ban products altogether. For example, some cities have banned the use of plastic bags at local stores. Many of these government actions came about because consumers demanded it. The government can also control the marketing of goods. For example, in Quebec, it's illegal to create ads that are directed at children. A lot of governments in the US have banned toys to be sold with children's fast food meals because it's seen as a marketing tool that encouraged kids to eat the food that wasn't very good for them. The government can also control prices. For example, natural supply and demand in a capitalist economy would say that when there is a high demand for goods, the price should go up. But the government will not allow companies to increase prices during an emergency, also known as gouging, because that's not fair to take advantage of consumers when they're in an emergency. And you're probably all aware that the government controls wages, because many youth have part-time jobs that make minimum wage. That's the government telling your company that's the least they can pay you. Those wage controls will impact your purchasing power. They're also going to lead to increased prices of goods, as the employer will pass along the increased cost of wages onto the products being sold. This creates inflation. The term consumer sovereignty refers to the idea that you can make your own decisions when it comes to consuming goods and services, and your choices can influence producers. If more people buy fuel-efficient cars and organic foods, that tells producers that the environment is important to consumers and will produce more of these goods. Another term for this is dollar voting. When you buy something, you're showing your support for that product, or when you don't buy something, you're showing your disapproval. In the previous video, I talked about how I will boycott products that are advertised using the technique of name calling, because that just drives me crazy. But there are other reasons why I might boycott a product or a company. It might be because I've gotten bad service, or I've heard that they use sweatshops to produce their goods. When I boycott something, I'm using my consumer sovereignty to send a message to producers. Now, my boycott might not make much of a difference, but if a lot of us boycott something, that will bring about change. For example, when it was discovered that Nike was using sweatshops to produce their shoes, many people refused to buy them and the profits of the company went down. So now they have pledged that they will pay fair wages to the people who work in the factories that make their shoes. There are many resources out there to help you find out whether or not a company is being ethical. For example, here's a website that I've used. Consumerism is important to our society because the purchase of goods and services helps to support our economy. But have you thought about all of the people involved with making and selling a product? Think of your phone. There are metals and plastics that come from all over the world. These resources need to be shipped to a factory that will create the components, then sent to another factory where all the parts are put together. It gets shipped again to the store to be sold to you, and of course there's a lot of people employed to do all of those things. And we didn't even talk about all the people working in research and development to create the phone you're going to want to buy next year. We often don't realize how many jobs we're impacting when we make a purchase. We live in a very wealthy country, and part of that wealth is all of the money that gets spread around through consumerism. It's important to be aware what influences our purchase and how our purchase impacts others.